Hey, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I got you about you, Rabbi.
Oh, no.
Good morning.
Okay.
Women. You know Hebrew.
Oh, I know Hebrew well.
Yes, you do.
Did you go to the Chafetz Chaim in Israel?
A little bit. I spent a few months there. Yeah. Also, I read the Hebrew books a lot. It's part of my job. So, the truth is that, I had a friend who was in yeshiva, and he also got a law degree at the same time from St. John's, which is not far, if you know Queens. St. John's is like 188th Street in like Fresh Meadows. So he said his classmates asked him if he knew Hebrew. He said, if you mean 12th century legal Hebrew, I think it's about Aramaic, whatever, one of the two. 12th century legal Aramaic, maybe. If you want to say, please pass the peas, then I would probably get stuck.
Yeah.
That's what it is. The truth is that you can study, you can spend your whole life certainly using the Siddur and the Chumash, but it doesn't mean you'll be able to go to Israel and have a conversation. Part of it depends on your abilities and the kind of schooling you had. I happen to like languages, and I'm more of a language person than a math person. But you had the foundation. You know this.
They're spoken, but they speak in the streets, the everyday people.
They speak in this street.
That Hebrew.
Right, it's not that Hebrew. They say Chinese, they don't have an alphabet. They have picture. Everything is pictures. All the words. Ideographs. So there's many different ways to speak Chinese, but it's always the same word. So if in the written, they can all understand, if they can read, they can all understand the writing. But if they speak it, it might sound different because they'll say the same thing in a different way.
It's an idiom.
That's it. Okay, anyway. So,
Aren't we lucky we're not Chinese?
I'm lucky we're not Chinese.
We just can't speak Hebrew, except for Mary.
Right. You know that joke about the guy goes to a Chinese restaurant and
The kosher one.
the kosher one, and all the waiters are speaking Yiddish, all the Chinese waiters. So he says, I got to find out more about this. He goes to the back room and asks the manager, how did you train all these Chinese waiters to speak Yiddish? He said, shh, they think it's English. Okay.
That's talking about us Jews, right? I love Chinese food.
Right. So the truth is that now it's Elul. So Rosh Hashanah is coming. That's the truth. So I figured if we want to talk about anything of a halachic nature, we can start looking at that. I said stuff, I don't know, maybe it's 4 weeks is a bit much. I don't know, 4 weeks to prepare for Rosh Hashanah? Not that much. And if we run out of stuff to talk about, we can always talk about Yom Kippur and about Sukkot. So I don't think we'll run out of material to talk about. Okay. So the first halacha, if the structure of the Mishnah Berurah, which is really the Shulchan Aruch or Chaim, the section of which talks about Orach Chaim is the way of life, what we call, I guess, the halacha. But it really means laws of daily living. It's one of the 4 sections of the Shulchan Aruch. The other 3 are monetary law, matrimonial law, and I guess ritual law, kashrus and stuff like that. Daily living is basically our schedule. It begins. The Mishnah Berurah has it broken into 6 volumes, but just for convenience, it begins with what you do when you get up in the morning and takes you through the day. Shachris, Mincha, Mariv, Kriyash Shema before we go to sleep. Then it gets on to the laws of Shabbos, right? And then after that, the laws of Pesach, the laws of Yom Tov, and then there's everything else. So everything else, after the laws of Pesach and the laws of Yom Tov in general, you have the laws of fast days, which we just did. This is already in the 6th volume. You have the laws of fast days in general and Tisha B'Av specifically. And then the next thing is Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Hanukkah, and Purim. So that wraps up the year and that wraps up the schedule of our lives. So Rosh Hashanah, what do we begin with? So as you know, today is the 2nd day of Elul. We had a 2-day Rosh Chodesh, Sunday and Monday. And on the 2nd day, which was yesterday, we blew the shofar for the first time. That's because whenever you have 2 days of Rosh Chodesh, the second day is the real Rosh Chodesh. The second day of Rosh Chodesh is the first day of the month. And the first day of Rosh Chodesh is the last day of the old month. And all months, all Jewish months, are either 29 or 30 days. A 29-day month ends after 29 days, and the next day is Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the new month. That's what we call a one-day Rosh Chodesh. A 30-day month ends after 30 days, but the 30th day is Rosh Chodesh, but it's still a part of the old month. And the second day of Rosh Chodesh is the first day of the new month. So the last day of Rosh Chodesh is always the first day of the new month. If there is a first day of Rosh Chodesh, it's really the last day of the previous month. This goes back to when they used to do the new moon. So after 29 days, for the first 29 days, you knew what month it was. After 29 days were over, you were just waiting for someone to show up and declare that we saw the moon. So you started treating it as Rosh Chodesh. Either way, and if somebody showed up that day, you say, okay, today's Rosh Chodesh, it's the first day of the new month, and last month was 29 days, and this month starts today, and tomorrow will be day number 2 of the month. If no one shows up the first day, so that first day was Rosh Chodesh, you say, okay, that was Rosh Chodesh, but that was the last day of the old month. I guess it was a 30-day month, and you would expect that someone would show up the next day. If no one shows up then you have a problem. So the Shulchan Aruch begins by telling us that there's a minhag to begin slichos on Rosh Chodesh Elul. So in case you missed that on the calendar, right? This of course is a Sephardic custom. The Shulchan Aruch was written by a Sephardi, and they do that. They begin slichos. So whenever you complain about not being able to have rice on Pesach, think about that the trade-off is. Now we say that's no big deal. The men have to get up for the slichos, the women have to cook the rice. There is truth to that, but for those people who are egalitarian, so keep in mind that if you're a Sephardi egalitarian person, then you have to get up Rosh Chodesh Elul and begin slichos for a whole month. There are people who want to be selective. It's got to be a package deal. One thing that they taught us in Yeshiva was, if you don't like it here, by all means go somewhere else. But wherever you go, you should stay there. Don't bounce around. There are different traditions in Jewish people. There are non-authentic traditions. There's certainly that exists. That always has existed. It existed in the times of the Mishnah. It existed after the times of the Mishnah. There were always groups that decided they wanted to make changes. And Jewish history shows us one of two things happen. Either it's a non-authentic change, and what eventually happens is it plays itself out, it becomes a new religion entirely like Christianity, or it dies out like the Sadducees, the Tzaddokim, the Karaim, it's basically died out. Or if it's authentic, then there's usually a fight, and everything settles down and it becomes part of the real diversity, which is the diversity of the Jewish people. So you have like the Hasidim, you have the various the Muslim movement, different times when the Rambam, there were things that were very controversial, but everyone realized at a certain point, hey, this is here to stay, and this is accepted. Sometimes people say, and I can't say yes or no to this, but people have made the count that sometimes these things are actually necessary, that if not, the controversy is there to keep things from getting too radical. If it would be too radical, if the Hasidim or the Muslim movement, if they had gone too far, they might have become, God forbid, like one of the other, but they were kept, from becoming too, and therefore they were able to stay and enhance rather than go too far off. Whatever the case may be, we do believe that there are different ways to approach the Torah, but each way is authentic, and mixing them together is not authentic. When you take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, like you make a salad out of it, it's not authentic. It's like going into not my metaphor, you're going into a pharmacy and saying, I like this one and I like that one, let me take half of each, and that not a good recipe. So the Shulchan Aruch says that the Sephardic custom is to begin slichos on Rosh Chodesh Elul, and the Ramah says the Ashkenazi custom begins to blow the shofar every morning on Rosh Chodesh Elul. That's not a biblical commandment. It's not even a rabbinic commandment. It's a custom. And the custom is there to remind us and to inspire us to do teshuvah. So now the concept of slichos is universal. The Ashkenazim do it as well, but the Ashkenazim just start a little bit later, right? The idea, it's an old idea. He says there are sources that tell us. Well, again, some of this goes back to, I guess, the first slichos we actually quote in our slichos. We quote from the Torah, from Moshe Rabbeinu's slichos. He said he prayed to Hashem to forgive the Jewish people. Well, for slicha, right? You bump into somebody. I speak Hebrew, right? You bump into somebody. What do you say? You say slicha, right? You ask for forgiveness. And Moshe asked for slach na la'alon ha'mazek god l'chastecha, right? And Hashem actually taught. Hashem said the first slichos really, because Hashem told Moshe that the right way is, you did a good job, and let me tell you what to say next time. If you really, they have like a kid comes over to you and says, "Can I have okay, next time the way you ask is like this." Right? So Hashem said, next time, Moshe, the way you ask is you say these 13 names of Hashem, and 13 midos of Hashem, and that's in the Torah, and we include that in our slichos. So the idea is an old idea. It goes back to the Torah, but the structure that we have is obviously much later. The slichos are a combination of some quotes from the Torah itself, many quotes from later parts of the Torah, from Nach, and then many we call piyutim, poems, that were written over the centuries by many authors, some Sfardim, some Ashkenazim, different countries, different times. And I heard that the most often, if you go to shul and you do such slichos, you often find yourself maybe more often than not, in the position of not being able to say all of it, either because the shul goes too fast, or because the shul skips, or because you came in late, or because you're leaving early. So unlike the Shemona Esrei, slichos are not a rigid. It was composed over the centuries, different places. The Sfardim and Ashkenazim have completely different versions. Even among the Ashkenazim, there's different types of traditions. The concept is to say some additional prayers, and the most I guess the only part that really requires a minyan is the Shlosh Esrei Midos. Right? This is a universal rule. We'll find the 13 midos of Hashem, it's in part of the slichos. Obviously, it's part of the service and Yom Kippur as well, and in the Sephardic and in the Nusach Sfard, the Hasidic style, even in the Ashkenazi Siddur, the ones that use the Sephardic type, they have it as part of the daily tachanun. After the Shemona Esrei, they say it every day. The 13 midos, the Ashamnu, the Vidoy and the. But you never say that unless you have a minyan. So
the person davening in their home.
Never says it right. There is some kind of opinion that if you do, you can read it with the trop as if you were reading from the Torah, because then it would be like you're just learning. But I think even that is not really recommended. You skip it. You skip that paragraph, and that's true if even if you're in a shul with 9 men. If the 10th person doesn't show up, you skip those parts. The other thing is that you skip there's a couple of small sections that are written in Aramaic. I don't know exactly what the concept is, but I think the idea basically is that Hebrew is more of the original language, the holy tongue, and more of a direct conduit. Basically, when you're praying as a group, I think the idea is that the power of the community and minyan praying together, you can pray in other languages, and it works as well. When you're on your own, you have to be more careful about how you phrase things, and therefore we only say things in Hebrew, not other language. I think that's the idea. No, regular tachanun, the rest of it, the part where we put our head down, or even the part where we say Hashamnu Bagadnu, according to those, that can all be said out of it. It's just that paragraph of the 13 midos and the Aramaic. Again, this is in the Slichos, just an Aramaic few lines at the end that we skip if we don't have a minyan. Everything else, Shema Kolenu, Avinu Malkeinu, you can say without a minyan. Anything else can be said without a minyan. Yeah.
Of course, I said, open curtain, blah, blah, blah.
Right, you wouldn't open it. Technically speaking, I don't think it's really forbidden to open the ark if you wanted to. But I would. Right, I mean, I don't have an ark. Even if you were in the shul, if I wanted to daven and go and open the ark and pray, I don't think there's any. I think people used to do that sometimes in the olden days. it was like kind of a thing. Say it's not really done. Certainly in terms of the kind of official, like if you're reading in the siddur and say, "Oh, here you open the ark and you're praying by yourself," I don't think you would do that. Right?
Right.
And the idea behind the slichos, obviously, again, that Hashem. Oh, what I was going to say was that I knew I lost my train of thought. So what I heard was, if I remember correctly, it's been years ago, but I believe I heard a rabbi say that if you have a limited amount of time, again, to say the slichos, it's not an all or nothing. Certainly, it's just really a collection over the years. It's very what's the word for it? It's kind of a collection of many different things. If you have to do a little, the best thing to say is the verses from the Tanakh. So they look like almost like you would skip over the in between the kind of the longer the poems. People think of the official slichos. In between these little like collections of scriptural verses. It's let's just run through that quickly. Let's get to the real. Those are really the real slichos, and those come straight from Tanakh. And the stuff in between the poems of the responsive poems, those were written later by other authors. So if anything, precedence should be given to those parts that are actually, you just feel like, oh, this is just psukim, but that's really the most sacred and the most ancient part of the slichos. Further, again, for clarification, slichos are done early in the morning. Right now, we don't necessarily do it early in the morning. The way the Shulchan Aruch describes it is the last Ashmores. Now, Ashmores is like a shift, right? If you're on duty at work, the night has 3 shifts. The angels switch the changing of the guard, whatever. The point is that it's the end of the night, the last third or the last half of the night. That's the time when Hashem kind of hovers, visits this world, and it's a time of goodwill, and that's why the ideal time, as opposed to the first half of the night, not a good time to say slichos. There's a famous, I think it's a tshuva from Moshe Feinstein, where he gave some kind of dispensation. People do slichos at like Mariv time, and they say never ever apply that. Like a very unique situation. It was like a dangerous neighborhood. Basically, it's not a good, because it's. I think the way it works is that we say midnight is kind of the transition where the forces of darkness kind of have sway, and after midnight, it kind of things turn and you're heading towards dawn. And it's that second half of the night where Hashem's compassion is most evident, and that's when I heard this. I used it's a kind of a joke. The Hasidim, they leave out Tachnun a lot. Oh, it's a yard side, it's a this, it's a that. My father-in-law is a little bit from Hasidic stock, like many of us. Maybe I am too, but they have to go back a few more generations. My father doesn't seem to have, his family doesn't seem to have that in them. So, but I must have made some comments about the Hasidim, leaving out Tachnun a lot. So he said, there's actually, he gave me an interesting explanation that he heard, that Tachnun is such a sacred and powerful prayer, where we're really pleading with Hashem. To say that without really meaning it is really offensive and almost sinful. So it's almost like, if you look at it, it's just like we don't say a bracha lightly, right? You only say a bracha if you're sure that you have to say it. If you're not sure, you leave it out. Why? Wouldn't you want to bless Hashem? Taking the name of Hashem in vain is so in a similar way to fall on our face before Hashem and plead for forgiveness without really meaning it is really not a good thing to do. So when we have to, but it's part of the siddur, we have to say it. But if we have an excuse, so if you look at it that way, it's actually an interesting way to look at it. We'll look for excuses not to say it because we know we're not really saying it the way we should. So the thing with slichos, their prayers for forgiveness, they're very powerful, but say them at the right time. This gets into some pretty deep philosophy, and we can talk about the whole concept of Rosh Hashanah. But Hashem, of course, doesn't change. Hashem doesn't have moods or phases. But Hashem is who He is. We pass through different time periods, and we have to react appropriately based on where we are. And it would be almost like if we recognize how weak we are, how dependent we are on Hashem's mercy, and how many shortcomings we have, we would not be so confident, right? We kind of say, "Oh, just open up, I'll pray," because what? And if we realize if a person really felt, sometimes we feel people who are really humble or they really feel guilty about it. He's like, "Can I really pray now? Can I walk into the? Well, I'm comfortable in the synagogue. What's the problem? Come and sit down." But a person who's not so familiar with it, sometimes it's good to be not so religious sometimes because they walk in, you really like, is it okay? My head's not covered. They don't feel that. They feel that. We should really feel that way whenever we come to the Hashem is letting us into His house. We shouldn't walk in with such swagger and like here I am. But we're used to thank God we're so comfortable in the shul because we've always been there. And but so the idea should be like, of course, I'm asking Hashem to forgive me. What can be better than that? I mean, Hashem wants me to do that. That's all true. We say that a lot. Hashem is waiting for us. He's begging us to cut. But then we shouldn't take it for granted as if like I can just do whatever I want. The first half, that's not the right time. That's when the accusing forces, the darkness, wait till the second half of the night. Time of compassion. We have to be aware. It should remind us that we shouldn't take things for granted or act like we're so deserving and we should just be able to march on whenever we want to. Additionally, as far as the context and the time, and that's as far as what time of the night we do it. As far as I should say also, right, so the ideal kind of textbook scenario is to say the slichos at the end of the night, like, before dawn, and that's reflected to some extent in the whole discussion about when you say the brachos. Typically today, if you go to a shul, they daven at 7 o'clock or whatever time. They just do the slichos before the shacharis, which is usually already daytime. So it's not really. And sometimes I've asked if I'm running around in the morning, you can say the slichos later in the day too. Just the time not to say it is in the earlier part of the night. But in principle, in theory, the time to say is at the end of the night. That's the time of compassion. The idea of tikkun chatzos, that's mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch in the very beginning of Mishnah Berurah in the laws of daily living. Pious people would get up at midnight and mourn for the destruction on any night of the year. It's the same idea that I think that at midnight is when things turn and kind of the darkness begins to turns a corner and you start looking towards the eventual coming of the dawn. That's the time to awaken and to plead for mercy, and Hashem's mercy is aroused, etc., etc.
Midnight changes.
Midnight is the right
time of the year.
Right. Well, yeah, right. No, these things are always right. No, it's never. Although midnight changes the least of all the time. The further away you get from midnight, the more it fluctuates over the course of the year. Midnight is it's like the North Pole hardly ever moves because it's right in the middle of the globe. But okay. Now, as far as the time of the year, why Rosh Chodesh Elul? Obviously, it's a month before Rosh Hashanah. It's a good amount of time. We start sending out dues letters and stuff like that. But there was actually something more specific. We know from history that, as we mentioned, Slichos begins with Moshe's prayers for the Jewish people, and the Jewish people's history of needing Slichos begins right at the very beginning of our history. Right after we got the Torah, we became the Jewish people. 40 days later, Moshe comes down from the mountain and there's a golden calf. So he smashes the 2 tablets. That's the 17th of Tammuz. Goes up again to do the slichos, to pray for the forgiveness. He comes down with the good news that they'll be given a second chance. Second set of 40 days that end at the end of the month of Av. He goes up for a third time for 40 days, Rosh Chodesh Elul. Comes down 40 days later with Yom Kippur, and that's when he has to come down with the second set of the tablets. So it says that third and final time that Moshe went up to heaven, when the Jews were going to be given a second chance, Hashem was going to reinscribe the 10 Commandments. They blew a shofar and they said, Moshe went up to the mountain, right? Don't make the same mistake. And the first mistake came about because they'd gone up the mountain, he hadn't come back. And they said he wasn't going to come back, and they made the golden calf. So this time the shofar was to remind them not to fall into the same trap. I found it very striking that the mistake that they made, we know is a very specific mistake. It was based on a miscalculation of the date. Rashi tells us this, that the first day, I guess Shavuot, the day that they actually stood at Har Sinai, that was not day 1, that was day 0. And Moshe went up to the mountain that day, but that wasn't a full day. The day already started. So the count of 40 days began from the next day. They didn't realize that. So they thought that was day 1. Next day would be day 2. And therefore, they expected him back a day earlier, and he actually came back. When he didn't show up, they got afraid. Then it says the Satan got involved and showed them images of Moshe's death, Moshe's funeral, and they were convinced that he wasn't coming back. They made a mistake, and they went to Aaron and said, "We need an intermediary, a substitute for Moshe." And as we know, somehow it drifted. Intention was to replace Moshe, but it drifted into something. What they created to replace Moshe was something that was not human and was considered. I was trying to call in. Hold on a second. Okay, 1 second. I'm going to just try to text somebody that someone's trying to get into the class and he's having trouble. So let me just text him the access code. Okay, if I get disconnected, I'll call back. Hold on.